Welcome back to Everard Junction. Obviously I've been absent for some time, good reasons for it, busy with life in general, and I had to insulate the loft, and it took a lot longer than I thought it would, to be honest. It was a lot of hard work. It is basically completed. There are some little things to tidy up and sort out, but the insulation is all in. I've installed 50mm thick Celotex insulation board in between the various beams that hold up the roof of the house. Behind these boards is an air gap which is 50mm or greater, the same thickness of the insulation I've used, so the roof itself and the tiles can breathe. And then over the top of that, in the more visual parts, where, for example, down here there'll probably be a back scene, so you're not going to see any of that, but from sort of here onwards, I have clad the roof in a white-faced hardboard, just a basic hardboard, and it just makes the place a lot brighter, makes it feel more like a room rather than an attic. So you can see there's all the boards right the way over the top. I've also repositioned and reconfigured the lighting, as well as add additional lighting. The layout will now orbit the room, so there are extra layout lights all the way around the house. And as you can see, I've made quite a bit of effort into sorting out the wiring as well, making it tidier and safer. I've given the wall with the horrendous brickwork a coat of white paint. It looks a lot better, although you will never hide the horrendous pointing of whoever it was who originally built this wall. Not very good, but at least it's white, reflects the light. Everything up here is lovely, evenly lit and bright. It's a much more pleasant place. Although the weather hasn't particularly cooled down yet, it's still quite mild outside, the difference up here already is phenomenal. There's a huge difference in ambient temperature up here. The temperature is much more stable. It stays pleasant pretty much all the time, no matter what you're doing. And it is lovely to come up here, rather than, whereas before I would come up here and I'd be able to see my breath. So the winter should certainly be much more doable up here in terms of continuing with the layout. I'm sure there will be some days where it is too cold, but I can now spend a lot more time up here more comfortably. And it's also a lot easier to heat. I can put the heater on up here, and after about 5-10 minutes, that's it. It's perfectly warm everywhere up here, and it stays like that for a good couple of hours afterwards. So the insulation seems to be doing its job. I didn't film it because it was such a long process, and it was a lot of work involved in, nasty corners like down there. It wasn't pleasant. There wasn't a lot of enthusiasm for doing it because it was such an unpleasant job. So I had even less enthusiasm for filming it, and the nature of the work meant I was constantly up, down, up, down, up, down. So it wasn't really practical to film it. Okay, so without wasting any more time, let's move on to the construction of the layout baseboards. The layout is constructed using a basic board that is 2 by 4 feet in size. That basic board I am trying to use everywhere possible. Some areas of the layout will be wider than others, but I will be using a combination of boards joined together so that everything is a modular size, and if need be, can be removed and go down through the hatch. I've gone for plywood. I've used a sort of medium grade exterior ply on the frame of the board, and I've used a higher quality birch ply on the top, and that's purely for aesthetic reasons, just to have a nicer bit of material on the top. Okay, so let's hand over to myself some time ago when I first started building the boards. So I've been out to a local independent timber merchant and got myself some plywood. As you can see, I've had the plywood pre-cut. The local merchant did this for me for free, which was a bonus given the amount of material that I needed cutting. This is going to save me a huge amount of time in terms of building the baseboards, obviously, having all of these pre-cut. What I am doing is making the cross pieces, and I'm just cutting the boards that I've been supplied with, which are 4 foot in length, down to 2 foot, which will be the width of each table. The wood I've chosen to use for this is 12mm thick. Just a standard size that I figured would do the job. I would recommend that you use 12. You could probably go down to about 9mm. Because I'm building this frame out of 12mm, I will almost certainly use 9mm for just the top sort of flat bit where the track goes, as the frame should be more than substantial enough to support a thinner piece of material. So one of the first things I've done is I have gone through the plywood and I've just picked out some of the nicer pieces which will form the sides of the tables. And the only reason I've done that is because the sides of the tables are going to be visual, that you will see them quite clearly looking at the layout. Now they'll probably be painted, they may even have a fascia over them or something, but I've picked the nicer pieces to keep in their entirety and use as the sides of each frame. Some of the nastier pieces, the bits that perhaps have lots of knots in them and perhaps a little bit of damage, will be the ones that get cut up and used for the internal bracing and ultimately end up being used for things like the legs and corner pieces, should I choose to add them. I've brought all the material into work purely because it gives me a lot of space for building these. I have a lot of space now in the loft, but the bracing and the way the house is constructed does mean flat floor space is somewhat limited. So I brought these into work. Again, I've got access to all my tools here as well, so it's actually going to be easier to build these here and then transport them home when they're completed. You can see obviously the amount of material that I've got. Having the extra space in here really is a bonus, and a big workbench, being able to build these with some degree of comfort. In terms of tools, for those of you that are interested, don't need to use too much, just some drill bits, some wood screws obviously for putting these things together. May use glue, may not, we'll see how we go. A set square or engineer square, just for making sure the right angles are good. Tape measure, a drill, cordless drill, various hand tools, screwdrivers and such. That should be all that I need, but again, I'm at work, so if I do need another piece of equipment, it is here and it's handy. For cutting these, I'm using a bandsaw. It's a saw orientated for metalwork, but it does just about do the job on the plywood. You can quite easily just use a tenon saw and cut these manually, but I've got the equipment here, so I'm going to make use of it. Obviously, most of the material has already been cut to size for me. I need to do the smaller pieces, the pieces that cross brace the tables, make any legs, and the corner pieces should I choose to add them. But the bulk of the cutting in terms of getting these pieces out of a single sheet has already been completed, so there isn't too much cutting to do. It should be a bit more of an assembly job. Right, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build one table frame. Make sure that I'm happy with the design and that it goes together and that it creates what I wanted. Once I'm happy, then I can commit and mass produce these things. I'm going to need quite a lot because of the extra space that I've now created in the attic and the amount of room that I now have to play with, so the layout will be quite a bit larger than the old one was. Okay, so I've drilled various holes in the first piece of the new baseboards to attach to the cross pieces, these shorter pieces here. There you go. You see how the glue has squished out at the ends. We'll get a good strong bond with that. And you can just wipe off the excess. I'm using the engineer square on the flat table where possible to make sure that these are going up directly. They're not, wonky. Wouldn't want that. Also, as I drill each hole into the timber, I put one screw in and then drill the rest, and it helps me. It makes things a little bit easier rather than having to try and hold this while you drill all the holes. Okay, so there is the first table, if you like, the first framework for the first baseboard. It's gone together quite nicely. It's a nice, strong, lightweight structure, and it was fairly easy to put together. It doesn't weigh very much at all. You can lift it up with one hand quite happily. So transportation into the loft will be quite easy. Obviously it will be a bit heavier when it has legs and a top on it. Yeah, quite happy with how that's gone. Any bits of the timber that have been used in here that are warped or twisted for any reason are all working with each other now. So as you look down the side, any bits that might have bowed have actually straightened themselves out because everything is pulling itself together to work as a common structure. So I'm quite happy with that. I will most likely put some sort of corner bracing just on the ends. The middle I won't worry about. You'll see some boards where they have holes drilled all the way through here. That's done for the reduction of weight. You'll see a lot of exhibition layouts that have done that because it just makes them a bit lighter and easier to transport. Some are always also there for threading things like wires through. I plan to have the wires installed differently in these baseboards, so I don't really need any holes, and as the layout's not going to any exhibitions, I don't really have a need to reduce the weight, so I have left them as they are. But I could have drilled holes if I wanted to. So we've gone from that to that. I just need to make a lot more. So let's kick off the montage and I shall begin to build a load more of these. I've designed it so most of the layout will use this basic 4x2 board. However, there will be some that need to be shorter, and there's one that needs to be a funny shape. And it's also been allowed for any alterations if I wanted to make the layout wider. That is still potentially on the cards. I might want the layout 3 foot wide, so it's all designed to be modular. So if I want an extra foot of width on the railway, then I can make a 1 foot wide board and it can simply screw onto this one with its own set of legs. So nice and modular and easy to transport, move about, should the layout ever need to come out of the attic for any reason. Okay, it's now dark outside and pouring with rain, but I have managed to finish 6 of the baseboard frames for the new layout. Plenty of material left to go, so it gives you an idea of how much there is still left to do. But I've used up all the time I have for today, so it's time to pack up and continue this another time. They're all built to near as damn it the same dimensions. Quite happy with how they've come out. They're nice and light, just lift straight up, and they're nice and strong. So the warping should be a thing of the past. Okay, well that's day 2 finished, and I've just finished making the one board that's a little bit of a strange shape. All the rest are 4x2. That's most of the boards completed. I think there's only about 2 boards left to make, but I'm going to make those at home, I think. I've also got to make all the legs, but that's going to be easier, I think, in the loft itself due to the unevenness of the floor and joists and things that might be in the way. So some of the legs might have to be a little bit more specific than others, so I think that'll be easier to do at home. So I'm going to load these up and get them out of here. Right, well, we are back up in the attic, or the loft, and I've brought all of the baseboards up here, and I'm now starting on the next stage of construction, which includes putting some tops on for the fiddle yards, and also including the facilities for the back scenes. So, when I've built the frames, I've made sure that these pieces are exactly 2 feet long, and the reason for that is then the addition of the thickness on the longitudinal boards, the longer boards, got one on this side, one on this side. That means that when you put a shop board down that's cut already to 4x2, it will only come to here where I've put this bit in. And the reason for that is so I can come along later and slot in a back scene. So if you imagine that this is one of the end supports for a back scene, and on the face of it, on this face, is either hardboard or plywood or whatever I decide to go with that has the back scene on it. That will then slot straight into the back, push down to a set depth, and the back scene will be right there, and I'll have the flat top here, and then if I need to remove it, it just comes straight out, which is a much nicer, flexible option than having a fixed one. So here's a full width top board. This is 9mm plywood, and this is, I believe, birch ply. This is a bit nicer than the stuff I've made the frames out of. This stuff is a bit higher quality. Just wanted something a bit nicer for the tops. Now, only the fiddle yards will have a full width top, but if we put it in its rough position, you can see we're flush here, and we come up to this piece I've put in here, so I can come along later with the back scene, slot it in. The piece on the face will then stop where it hits this top board, and there you have a back scene or a back board. I will have the same on the fiddle yards just in case, you know, a careless hand knocks something on the last track over. It'll just fall to one side and hit this. It won't tumble off and have a nasty experience on its way to the floor. An added bonus of that as well is that it keeps the boards relatively modular, so that if the layout has to leave this room for any reason, I can take the back scene straight out. We'll probably have baseboard joins in places. We'll see how that goes. I may make it a bit more fixed. But the theory being, I can disconnect this board from the layout, pull out the back scene, and then I can take it over to the hatch, and I can go straight down there, and it's out of here, and it can be put somewhere else if needed. So there we go. Done the first one, and I'm quite happy with it. Looks nice and strong, nice and rigid. I've added an extra piece in the middle, just there, so that the back edge of this plywood top is always screwed to something all the way along its length, and everything is looking nice and level. So I've gone ahead and I've already made another one. I'm now in the process of making a third one, and they will form the fiddle yard boards that will be over there. So yeah, happy with that. It's coming along nicely, so I'm going to keep going. So there's the solution for the back scenes, and it's working quite nicely actually. So if you imagine this is the end of a back scene frame, that will be the same length of each individual board. Let's imagine this is the end of it. Come along, slot it straight through there. It's nice and rigid. It's not moving forward, backwards, and it won't move left and right once it's secured to a rectangular frame. So that's a nice solution. They'll just go in and out. So there's 2 done, and I'm now making the 3rd. So for the back seam pieces, it's just a case of taking some of those lengths of timber, cutting them to the length between here and here, and then what I'm doing is I'm clamping another piece of material between to represent the back seam being installed, so that when this outer piece is fixed, the back seam will have a nice tight fit when it's slotted in and out of the baseboard. I've been putting some thought into how to make the legs, and I wasn't too sure at first, but I think basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these planks that I've got and I'm going to cut them down the middle, and then using the 2 pieces I'm basically going to make a little corner like that and have one of them in each corner of the baseboard frame, and that should be nice and strong, and then I can put a sort of adjustable foot in the bottom of it, which will then allow me to adjust the height if the floor's uneven. I could just do it with these, but there's a bit too much material. I think it would be a bit of a waste. The legs will be fine if I cut this in half and then use the other piece to come up the sides. As they are, they're a bit too big and bulky to use, so I need to cut them down. Now, I do not have access to a table saw, so this is my slightly sketchy method of getting a straight cut down one of these boards. I've marked a centre line down the piece of wood, and then I've clamped a big piece of box section that is straight onto the edge, allowing for an offset, which is the same offset as the circular saw. So I should be able to push up against this piece, which is clamped down hard, and just run the saw all the way to the end, which will hopefully get me a straight cut. Right, well that's worked out quite well actually. So now I can put them like that, and that's much more in keeping as a leg for the table. Much smaller. You can see if I'd just done it out of the full thickness, it would have been complete overkill. So I'm quite happy with that. Okay, well that's all the pieces I've brought with me cut up. That should make quite a few legs. Obviously they won't be this tall, so I should probably be able to hopefully cut these in half. We'll see what the height ends up being. So with that completed, I've been thinking about the adjustment for the legs. The floor is not level, so I will need some form of adjustable feet on the bottom of the legs. Now you can buy these, I found quite a few listings on eBay for them, and you can buy them in DIY shops, but you're looking at sort of £10 for 4 sort of cheapish adjustable feet. So I've decided just to make my own. It's going to be considerably cheaper, and I can make them to do exactly what I want. Okay, so I've got a bit of 2mm mild steel. It's probably a bit overkill really for what I'm doing, but it's what's here, and it's just a scrap that's been lying around for a while, so I shall make use of that. And I've got some bolts here as well, 2 nuts on the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this sheet of steel into equal shaped just rectangles, and then if we look at it side on, what I'll do is I'll bend the rectangle into an L shape. And then what I can do is I can weld on a nut either onto the top or the bottom. Let's say the top. Then I can put the bolt through that nut, and as I do the bolt up, it will push down onto the floor and lift the table up, and then I'll have a nut on the bottom that will just lock it solid when I've got the adjustment I want. And that should be a fairly easy means of adjusting the height of each baseboard so they're perfectly level. Right, I'm going to cut this nasty bit off the end, square up the piece, then I'll make all my various markings and cut it all out. Easiest way to cut this would be to use the metal guillotine, but because this is 2mm it's a bit too thick, so I'll be using a traditional angle grinder with a cutting disc. Okay, there's my strip of metal, and each one of these rectangles represents one leg adjuster. So now I can cut all these out using the metal shears. Be flipping careful when you're using one of these, because if it will cut through this, it'll cut one or more of your fingers off without any trouble at all. So there we go. Got quite a few adjusters there. I will obviously need to make some more, but this will do for now. Okay, I've drilled some holes. Don't have to be super accurate, because what you're doing is making an adjustable foot. Drill wandered off a little bit on that bottom one, but it doesn't really matter. So that will take the bolt, which will have a nut on it, and there'll be a nut actually welded to this plate to give me something to do the bolt up into. And then up here, these two smaller holes, they'll actually take the wood screws and be attached to the table leg, so the bend will be across the middle there. So while they're flat and easy to work with, I'm going to weld the nut on. So the first thing to do is just clean up the metal around this hole where that nut will be welded. Okay, welder's ready, so now I'm going to weld this nut onto this plate, and then I'll be able to wind the bolt in and out. Two decent sized blobs is all you need to hold the nut on. It's never going to be subject to any extreme forces, so that'll be more than sufficient. So there we have some nice threaded holes. Next thing to do is to mark and then bend this into a 90-degree bend, and then that will be able to attach to an upright table leg, and I can put a bolt down through there and adjust its height. Okay, there they are. A basic adjuster is made. Just dressed them out a little bit on the anvil just to get some of them a little bit straighter. So they will go on like so, and then should allow for a nice easy adjustment. There will be a tendency for them to weaken or break over time if they're not modified beyond this point, because they are only one flat bit of metal that's been bent at 90 degrees. So there needs to be a reinforcer that goes along the side to hold them in their current shape. So just using this little bit of 1.2 scrap metal, I am going to make some little triangles that just go on the sides here. I'll just tack those on. Don't need to be fully welded, and they'll just hold them in their current shape and stop them from weakening or getting broken. So there's all my little triangles I've cut out, and then I'll just weld them onto the side of these, do them on both sides, and then they'll be nice and strong. Should last a very long time. There you go. Should do the trick. Obviously I've got to grind the welds down a little bit, tidy them up, but that should be perfectly sufficient. Okay, there's the first batch, all done. So now I'm just going to clean up some of the welds round some of the corners, make them look a little bit nicer, and then I'll give them a coat of paint, and they can go onto the baseboards, and can actually start getting some baseboards assembled and in situ. Just giving them a quick dusting of etch primer and then some satin black over the top of that. Just waiting for those to dry. So once that's done, I'll take them home and can carry on building the baseboards. Okay, so begins another day, and today I would like to try and get the fiddle yard boards up onto some legs. I've got all my various bits and pieces, so I can cut these down to form the legs for the fiddle yards, and they will run along this back side of the house. Okay, there's the first couple of bits cut, so that will eventually form the leg in the corner of each baseboard, and it will also have an added bonus of just strengthening the corners, so I won't really need to make any additional reinforcement. So I'm just going to use a spirit level to make sure that these are straight, and then screw them directly to the table, and then if for any reason the layout does have to come out, I'll just unscrew them from the table, and then everything can be removed. Okay, first leg is installed. It's very sturdy. I'm surprised at just how sturdy it actually is. So I'll put the other 3 legs on this table, and then I will put my adjuster on one of these faces. Doesn't really matter which one, but yeah, quite happy with that. It's nice and strong. Okay, that's the first 4 legs on this table, and I've just started putting in the adjusters in. So I've just cut a small reinforcement block of wood, and I've glued that to the leg, bolted this to the leg, and then I can put the bolt through, and then it'll come out through the bottom and allow me to adjust the height of the table. So there we go. There's the first completed baseboard. This will be one of the boards for the fiddle yard. Very happy with how it's come out. Each board doesn't exactly cost the earth, and they're a vast improvement over the old baseboards. Much stronger. Feels really nice and sturdy. You can put pressure on it. It doesn't feel like anything is sort of sagging or giving way, or there's any give in it. The legs are nice and stiff. I mean, to be honest, you could pretty much stand on it, and even standing on it you don't feel any real movement under your feet. So if anything, it's a bit overkill for a model railway, but quite happy with that. So if we can just get all the others to be as good, that should last a very long time indeed. And there are the adjusters all installed. I've made sure that they sit a little higher so that the table leg can have the opportunity to sit on the floor if that area is level, but should it not be level, just wind the screws in and you can see it's lifting the leg up. Now I probably will end up putting some sort of a foot or something underneath there, but we'll see how it goes. For now, the bolt seems to be more than adequate. Okay, the first 2 boards for the fiddle yard are now installed. I haven't set the adjusters up or anything yet, but you can see that first board I made, I gave it a leg in each corner, 4 legs. But the one that's attached to it, there doesn't need to be another leg immediately next to that leg. It would just be a waste of material. So I've only put 2 legs on this one and then screwed it to the adjacent board. And then if for any reason this all has to come out, just undo the screws and the boards become separate again. They are quite high, 2 reasons. One, easy access to the items that are stored underneath, and also I do have to negotiate the water tank, which I'll be making a board obviously to bridge. And you can see we're about the correct height. The board that goes over that will be a specific shape and design, so it will not be the same as these, and I have not made it yet. To give you an idea of size, if you think of the old layout, which was a U shape, you had the station over there up against the brick wall, you had the countryside over here, and you had the little TMD area here with the town scene in the corner. The helix that was on this side of the layout was here, where you see this board. That's where it was. So the new layout will come much further along, and it will come around me and up this side. So it is going to take up quite a bit more space, but I will have everything on one level and everything should work properly. I'm particularly happy with how level it's looking. It's looking nice and level, and that's before I've even gone ahead and adjusted any of the legs. So it's certainly going to run quite a bit smoother. So this board here, I will now make 2 legs for, a mirror image of this one. It will then attach to that end where the fan is, put the fan somewhere else, and then we'll have a nice long run and that may not be the final length of the fiddle yard, because then I'm going to start bringing baseboards down here and we're going to see what sort of works out in terms of length. So it's all a bit up in the air at the moment, but it's coming together. There's the third one installed, exactly the same way as I installed the one at that end. So now we have a nice expanse of fiddle yard. There's about 12 feet of space to play with there. So now I'm going to start adjusting the legs and get everything level. Okay, well that's all the boards levelled out, and the adjusters are working very well. You can see how high some of the legs have had to come up off the floor. So glad I did that. I knew it was going to be a problem, so it's good that that's sorted out now, and if the floor ever moves or if a baseboard moves, I can just go under there with a spanner and readjust it. Okay, well I think that will do it for this video. Got 3 boards installed, starting to look a little bit like a layout now, although there is still a hell of a lot of work left to do before a train negotiates it, but we're headed in the right direction. So next time I'm going to start obviously continuing this, so we'll be going round the corner and all the way up round the room. Still plenty to do, plenty of bits to get rid of and tidy up, and there's still a bit of junk up here, so still a long way to go, but we are getting there.